Greetings, travelers. Welcome back to Saguache, Colorado. We're at the Gillette Museum again, and here is the chief.
Well, good to see everybody again. I guess Kevin thought he'd better check up and see what we added to it. Well, we're still getting all kinds of interesting new and different pieces. We just got this waist gunner display from a B-24 in. Works really good for kids. But I guess more relevant to this point in time, inside we've got some pieces from the Revolutionary War that are now 250 years old. That might be more interesting. Just that feed chute stuff is $100 a foot. This would be half.
50 caliber waist gun from a
B-24.
B-24 Liberator. Okay, let's go inside.
Some of the more interesting stuff that we've got available from the Revolutionary War period that people ask about is this is a Brown Bess, which was a standard service weapon on both sides. Largely the British used this, but every chance we got, we were using a flintlock version of this piece, which was rifled. They were limited to about 70 yards with a buck and ball load, basically a glorified shotgun, whereas our boys had these rifled flintlocks that were good out to 200 and 300 yards. So they can lay back out of range of the British, and the British almost thought that was cheating. It's like they literally have ads going back that talked about in the British newspapers this as an assault weapon because they thought it was unfair. Something like this would be one of the period flintlock actual pistols. Now, we used a lot of the French stuff. They were a big supplier for us, but this is one that was actually made by us. It's hard to see, but up in here there's actually U.S. marks. Something you'll notice on all of these weapons is, well, this one shot. They talked about keeping your powder dry. Well, you had to put powder in that pan. That comes down, and then your flint comes down, makes a spark, and that's what set the gun off. So either way, you just had one shot, not a quick reload. It's really close quarters. So they always had a really heavy pommel. They really used them more like a club than they did a firearm. Same with these. Your buttstocks on all of your early military pieces was a real heavy piece because they were fighting with it. More like a club. This would be an actual Revolutionary War pistol that was issued to the troops. It was probably made up of like imported parts from Belgium, different places in Europe. They would get the locks, they'd get the barrels, and then they'd put together the stock and assemble the firearm. You could tell it's not one of the dueling pistols or other sporting type pistols. They really didn't have any of that because the stock it's effective, but it's kind of crudely made as compared to a normal dueling pistol or the other target type pistols. There's a commercial French imported pistol, which French were very large suppliers for us in the Revolutionary War. So if you look, though, it's kind of like we were talking with the pommels. They still have that same big kind of heavy pommel on the bottom because they used it as much like a club to fight with as they really did with that one shot. They're both the same bore as what you'd have with the Brown Bess musket. This is a replica of a piece known as a grasshopper in the Revolutionary War time period. It would be about a 6-pound cannon, something like that, that was used in the heavy woods and cover. Your standard guns that were 12-pounders, well, they've got a 6-foot wheel on them. They've got a 2,000-pound barrel. You can't get that through heavy cover. But two guys could grab this and drag it up in there. It's not quite as massive as the others, but they're still very devastating and effective. Okay, one of our most significant historical pieces in here would be that British redcoat. That's actually a Revolutionary War period British coat, but what's really interesting are the buttons. When the British had it, they had crown buttons. When the colonials captured anything, they reissued it, including uniforms, but they would take the crown buttons off and put plain brass buttons on. So as configured here, that uniform would have been on both sides. We have a picture in the background. It shows, Washington crossing the Delaware. Well, if you looked in that famous painting, you'd struggle to find 10 people in a uniform. It's not they didn't want them, they just didn't have them. And even in current times, I've seen situations where you got 3 or 4 different uniforms even today that are on the battlefield. For the people that want a little more history, a really, really good book is Miracles in American History. All through our history, there's been a lot of significant, miraculous events that have happened that changed the battlefield. From Washington crossing the Delaware to freak frogs and storms, and all the way up to date. This author is an extremely knowledgeable historian, and he's really put it together. And I know a lot about history, but there's a lot of little things that people had no idea. Even going on to the next war in 1812, British took the capital. They set the White House on fire. A freak storm come in, put out the White House fire, and blew the British off the field. And we're talking cannons, troops, everything. And it's like, well, where did that come from? I've seen in the White House myself where the burnt area is in one of the hallways that they've still maintained to show what had actually happened. Real good book. This is something that a lot of people may not think of, but when this country is being formed, the Native Americans had a huge role in it. Now, they were on both sides, but a lot of what we would have learned on how to survive early on was with their help. A lot of our early Constitution was based on things from the Oneida Indian tribe and how they run their civilization. I mean, they're kind of nomadic people, but the basic principles of how the tribes operate, how they interact with each other, the states, well, that's basically your Native Americans. They're like states, only they're mobile. So they used a lot of those principles established by them to form this country. At the Gillette Museum, we have a pretty wide variety of pieces going all the way back from the Revolutionary War to date. All I try to do in here is show examples of actual physical history items to pique people's interest. The kids can look up anything, same with adults, but you have to have some idea that an event happened. And then talking with a lot of the kids at the schools and different places, it's real clear there's a lot about especially our early history, they have no idea. If you just kind of plant that seed, they can look it up. And if they can ask questions, I can tell them more than a lot of people probably know, but mostly they just need a good general idea of our history and how to learn what it was all about.
Well, thank you, Chief, so much, and happy birthday, America.
Happy